welcome everyone today, and thanks for taking some time out of your day. We're at about 66 participants now. I expect that to grow. So let me give you an introduction. This is our reboot quiz show, and so in the intro, we're going to talk about some really interesting things. And we'll start with saying, did you know, and I'm sure most of you know, that most professional athletic teams, dance teams, Olympic athletes have sports psychologists and nutritionists on staff. And why? Because athletes know that performance is not just about conditioning their muscles. They know that they need to feed their body and mind so that they can really make a difference in their performance. But the science of peak performance isn't just for professional athletes, of course, and all of us can derive great benefit from the science in terms of energy, productivity, mood, and more. So today I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Jo Lichten. She's the author of 6 books, including Reboot, How to Power Up Your Energy, Focus, and Productivity. And she'll cover the science of eating for energy through a fast-paced quiz show format. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Jo.
Thank you very much, Anne. Yeah, and it will be very fast-paced, so be ready to answer in the poll. You might have to put a few things in the chat box as well. So, and we talked about athletes in that introduction, but I want you to realize that it's not just the physical athletes out there. Well, let me first tell you, in writing my book, Reboot, I reviewed over 1,000 medical research studies that focus on this whole idea of energy. And we're going to be talking about that. So when we think about athletes, we think about their physicalness that allows them to achieve their greatness, through physical training, but also the nutritionists and the sports psychologists play in there. But my guess is that none of you are being evaluated on your ability to leap tall cubicles in a single bound, right? We don't need that kind of physical, ability. But I'm guessing you can probably relate to this new sport. Well, it's not a new sport. It's been around for hundreds of years, but a new sport in terms of what we've been hearing about on the news. It's a sport that has been featured in this new Netflix miniseries. Do you know what sport I'm talking about? It's a mental sport. If you know, put it in the chat box, because the first person who puts it in the chat box gets 2 bonus points. Oh, Itachi, did I pronounce that right? It's chess. It's chess. So yeah, you get 2 bonus points. So make sure you put it down on a piece of paper or count it on your fingers. That's going to be kind of hard because you're going to run past 10. But I want you to realize that thinking about energy is not just important for our physical body, but also for our mental body as well. And I don't know, did you enjoy watching The Queen's Gambit? I mean, raise your hand if you enjoyed that. Did you? How many of you raised your hand, even though I can't see you? And you know what? I love that you're getting really involved. So if you did raise your hand, you get another bonus point as well. But anyway, I can't see you, but that's okay. We can chat in the chat box. But it was really interesting. Ever since that movie came out, and I did enjoy it, but I really enjoyed all the interviews and then the research that came out about chess shortly after that. For example, I don't know if you saw the interview with Trevor Noah. He was talking to Grandmaster Maurice Ashley. And the first thing he said was, whoa, check out those biceps. Why do you have to work out so much? Those players, those little pawns and so forth, they don't weigh all that much. And he said, oh, you'd be surprised. In order to work out, in order to perform 4 to 5 hours a day, you need to train 3 to 4 hours a day. And I thought, oh my gosh. But you know what? They found out that physical fitness can help us with our performance, how we can focus and concentrate, because I am all about getting work done as quickly and as efficiently as possible so we can get home and have more fun. Well, in your case, you're stuck at home, but you know what I mean, right? And, athletes also pay attention to the science about sleep. I love talking about sleep. I do medical continuing education on sleep because most people, I don't know, they wear this badge of honor about, oh, I only got 3 hours of sleep. And well, you're not performing the same way, trust me. Even athletes, if they're going to a competition, they go into the Olympics or whatever, a certain game, they typically arrive a few days in advance to get their body in sync, because we know that jet lag can diminish their performance. But business people like us, oftentimes we get on a plane and we have to, perform right when we get off the plane. We don't have a few days to adjust. So that's why the whole science of sleep is really important. And yet when we think about performance, focus and concentration, keeping a stable mood, being able to problem solve effectively, getting along well with others, all of those kind of factors, we oftentimes don't think about conditioning our body and mind for it. We think about, okay, what kind of software do I need? Do I need some more hardware? Do we need more training? That kind of stuff. Maybe I just need to be more motivated. Well, you know what? The way we eat, sleep, move, and think can really influence us. Now, we're just going to be talking about eating today. And in the quiz, and I think we got 95 people on the call so far. So I want you to realize it is a quiz show. There is 1 point, unless I say otherwise, 1 point for every correct answer. It's on the honor system, but just like most other quiz shows, we're going to have prizes. So you have to keep track of it. So are you ready for that first question? All right. So let's imagine you have something important you have to get to, something you're really looking forward to. Now, wouldn't it be fun? I mean, you have to get out of the house to get there. So you get up early in the morning, you get in the car, you're running a little bit late because you're like out of practice and getting ready, but you say to yourself, oh, you know what? If everything goes smoothly with the traffic, the construction, all of that, then I'm going to make it there on time. So you start up the car and the fuel light goes on. What are you going to do? All right, here's your first poll question. And here we go. What are you going to do? Are you going to just drive and hope you're going to make it? Drive as far as you can go and then look for a gas station? You're going to put some gas in the car? Are you going to go back to bed? Tell me what you're going to do. Oh, good. None of you are saying go back to bed. That's really important right now. Sometimes it just feels like, I give up. It's so stressful. Now, there are some people that want to hope and pray you'll make it there. But you know what? So many times, if you know you don't have enough gas to get it there, it doesn't matter that you're a positive thinker. You're probably not going to make it there, right? Although I did find out one time when I couldn't reach a gas station, I had at least 5 miles more than they told me on the dashboard. But still, we don't want to risk that. So you can drive as far as you can go and then look for a gas station. But what if there's not a gas station there? I know that's happened before. And certainly we don't want to go to bed. I mean, we don't want to give up. So you want to put some fuel in the tank. But here's the thing. What does that have to do with fueling the body? Turns out a lot. Because, sometimes it's easy to give up, choice D, when you say, I give up, I'm going back to bed, but I don't want you to feel that way, because no matter what your genetic makeup is, no matter what you've done in the past, there is always something you can do. And I'm a very realistic person. There's always something you can do that'll improve how you feel, how you respond, how you react. So let's focus on that, right? Now, if you chose A, having a positive attitude is so important in life, but you know what? Just like we need fuel in the tank to get us where we need to go, we need fuel in this tank as well. So having a positive attitude just isn't enough to cut it. So yeah, we need to have some fuel in the tank. So let me ask you the next question, and that is, where do we get our energy? Does it come from the way we eat, the way we sleep, the way we move, or the way that we think? We get fuel from the foods that we eat. And some of you are going to debate the other things, but I want you to realize that yes, when we have good quality sleep, the right amount of it, we do feel better. But you know what? It didn't fuel us. It just made us feel better. In other words, we're more energized, more energetic, but we don't really have more fuel. We need to eat to stay alive. If we don't, we'll continue to lose weight and eventually die. So we need to have food. And movement is so critical, and certainly it helps us to feel more energetic, because when we move more often, and not just an exercise type of structured program where we work out for an hour a day. There's some research just recently that they've done called organizations in motion, and it was done by a Johnson & Johnson company, in which they looked at just small bouts of movement, like every hour or so, getting up and doing a few jumping jacks, walking briskly around the kitchen table, whatever it is. Those kind of things can improve our performance, make us feel more energized, but again, it doesn't give us energy. And same thing with the way we think. So we need to be able to eat. So when we eat, I think you realize the food gets broken down in little tiny pieces. And once it gets tiny enough through our stomach and our small intestine, these small little pieces make it out into our bloodstream and then into every cell that needs it. And bam, that's where you get ATP. And you know what? We know that our food doesn't just affect, like the composition of our body, it actually affects everything about it. There was a classic study done in 1944. You might have heard about it. It was the Minnesota starvation experiment, in which I think it was 36 young, healthy men offered to starve just for science, to see how we can refeed people that are in a starvation mode. And they lost 25% of their weight. And it didn't just change their body. These people became depressed, apathetic, unmotivated, moody, very preoccupied with food. They couldn't focus and concentrate. Their mental ability went. So we know that food affects the entire body and mind. So in fact, have you ever looked up the word calories in the dictionary? Or it could be kilojoules for that matter. Do you know what it is? Go ahead and put it in the chat box if you know what the definition is, or what does it mean, the word calories. You'll get 1 bonus point if you're the first person to put it. Yeah, energy. There you go, Amy. It is a measurement of energy. So we don't have to talk about the specifics, but a lot of times people say, oh, it has so many calories and blah, blah, blah. And they talk about calories as if they're bad. But I want you to realize that we need to have calories or we don't get energy. In fact, most of us know this innately, because if you've ever had a skipped meal, right? You didn't eat because maybe you were stuck on a plane, which not too often right now, or stuck in a meeting. Maybe that happens more often. Or maybe you're on some crazy diet. It's right after January 1 and you're saying, oh, I'm so hungry, but I can't eat. Do you realize how it makes you feel? A lot of us turn very hangry, don't we? Right? We get a little short-tempered, maybe, hungry, dizzy. Maybe some of you even get a headache. It affects our entire body. So here's our next question. What about black coffee and black tea? Do black coffee and black tea, we're not talking about with milk and sugar added, but do they give you energy? Not quite 50-50, but it's pretty close. So people say, well, yeah, it does give me energy. And you know what, again, you're thinking in terms of, yes, it does make me feel energized, but because calories are a measurement of energy, it can't give you energy. I know you're thinking, well, no, it does. But see, it really is a stimulant drug. And I'm not saying it's bad or anything like that, but I want you to realize when they do research studies on caffeine, what they typically find is it really affects your focus and attention. And by the way, a lot of the studies done with caffeine are based on people doing computer experiments. So they're looking at speed and accuracy and all that kind of stuff. And they find that people are more focused and more attentive. So you might feel like you're getting more work done or whatever, but it is really fake energy. In other words, if you were to drink caffeine only all day, you still lose weight, right? So we know it's not going to give you the energy. And by the way, for those of you who are drinking caffeine all day and then wonder why you're crashing in the evening, it's right after dinner and you're like, I can't get anything done. And yet you had big plans to do things, fun things with the family, maybe your own personal hobbies, but you're crashing. It's probably because you didn't give yourself fuel during the day. Caffeine is fake fuel. It makes you not realize you're hungry, but adrenaline does the same thing. So if you're one of those people gets really energized when you're working on an exciting project, you also might forget about eating. Also realize that B vitamins, they oftentimes, in fact, I brought over a B vitamin bottle. Have you ever looked at the label of what it says? Like this one says it supports energy production. It isn't energy. It can't give you energy. In fact, all it does is help your body to make energy, which only works if you're deficient in the first place. If you're not deficient, it's not going to do anything. You've wasted your money. So I want you to realize this is a really important thing, that it's important to understand that we get energy from the foods that we eat. But caffeine is still okay, like I said. But it's important to drink the right amount of caffeine. And one of you asked in the previous questions were, when Carrie and Ann sent them out, is, about caffeine. How much caffeine? What is the optimal dose of caffeine? Would you say it's just a small cup of coffee, like Mad Men size? Would you say it's, an average size? Would you say you need a large one? Or do you need to go to the largest one that there is at your favorite coffee place? What do you think? Is there an option bigger than XL, Mackenzie? It probably is. Well, you can see that most people guess small and medium. It is true. This small little cup of coffee, Mad Men size, that's about 100 milligrams of caffeine. So when you hear about, an average cup of coffee has 100 milligrams, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, okay, I'm only drinking one, that's no big deal. But no, see, this big one probably has 300 milligrams of caffeine. So it's important that you know how much that is. And what they found out was that somewhere around 50 to 100 milligrams is all it took to peak in terms of focus and attention. And keep in mind, most of these studies, when they do that, they only allow caffeine users into the study. In other words, if some of you don't drink caffeine, and that is perfectly fine if you don't, you can have the same amount of focus and attention. But I'm just saying, if you say to yourself, oh, no, I definitely need more caffeine than that, realize, no, these studies were done with caffeine users, probably just like you. So yeah, all you need is a small amount. After that, you get more into that nervous jitteriness stage. In other words, then it decreases your performance. So it's like a bell curve. This is a small amount, and then your performance diminishes after that. See, now the real issue, what most people don't understand, is most of us are drinking that caffeine first thing in the morning. Whether we're talking about energy drinks, Diet Coke, which is my cup of caffeine, tea, doesn't really matter. Most of us are drinking most of it first thing in the morning. And I'll tell you, the biggest problem is not that you need caffeine. The biggest problem is what? One extra bonus point if you put something in the chat box. Water, Amy, yay! It is water. Check your pee first thing in the morning. I guarantee it's yellow. And some of it's this yellow. The darker it is, the more likely you are dehydrated. Now, other things can factor in the color of your urine. But still, you probably notice it's darker than the rest of the time of the day. And it's because you're dehydrated. While you're sleeping, all those hours, you're giving off some of the water in your body, you're sweating as well. And so you're dehydrated. So when people think that they need, I need a second or a third or an extra large cup of coffee, what they really need is more water. That's where that Boston accent comes out, water. So the research has shown that when you're dehydrated, it can really affect your performance. In fact, they found out that you can be, it can affect your performance at what level of dehydration? Is it 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%? What's the minimum that you can see changes in the body? Keep in mind the human body is 60% water, so we do have a lot of water. We're talking about the total weight of the body. When would you start experiencing ill effects? And the answer actually is 1%. Now, I think 2% for some of you that might have been into the science probably heard about that, because we did hear that 2%, even 3% is where most athletes noticed that they had diminished response to like strength and speed and stamina and all that kind of stuff. But more recently, they've found that even a 1% level of dehydration can negatively affect your feeling of energy, your mood, and even bring on headaches in some people that are sensitive to it. So that's going to affect your performance both at home and at work. So it's important to keep up that. Now, what is 1%? 150-pound person. Well, if they're 1% dehydrated, that's 1.5 pounds. The thing to remember about water is a pint is a pound the whole world around. So that's 475 milliliters for some of you who are acquainted with that. But in other words, a 16-ounce bottle is for every pound. So in other words, it's just 12 ounces that they're dehydrated. It really isn't that much. How many of you have ever maybe sat down to a meal and found yourself taking that water even before you eat, and you're go. I mean, you're so dehydrated, like the whole glass goes down. My guess is you're at least at that 1% level, if not more. So what the executives that I've worked with, when we share about caffeine and dehydration, and they're typically, when I worked with Johnson & Johnson's Human Performance Institute, these C-suite executives were with us for 2.5 days, so 3 mornings. And we would talk about this on day 1, and nearly every single person was saying, you know what, you're right. I tried that the other 2 days, drank more water, and you're right. I didn't need the same level of caffeine. So don't assume you need more caffeine. Maybe what you need is more water. Next question, since we know that calories are a measurement of energy, if we eat more, does it give us more energy? So let me end the polling and let me tell you what you said. Does eating more give us more energy? Most people said no. But it actually does give us more energy. And let me tell you why. Because some of you are saying, no. When I eat more, I feel sluggish, sleepy. I don't feel low. But it didn't give you the kind of energy you wanted. But the thing is, this stuff around the middle, guess what? What is it called? Those are our fat stores. That's stored energy. So we did get more energy. We just didn't get the kind of energy that we wanted. So, eating the same old calories any time of the day is not the answer to be able to be at our very best all day long. At work and with our family, we want to be able to focus on how we eat, the types of foods that we're eating. So let me ask you the next question. What kind of diet, and keep in mind the definition of diet is everything you eat and drink in a day. So I'm not saying you have to go on a diet. That's what people think about it. I'm using more of a scientific definition. But here you go. What do you think is the best diet for creating energy? Would you say it's low carbohydrate, high carbohydrate, going veg, intermittent fasting? What do you think? They all might be able to work, but none of them are any better than the others. And let me explain about this, because it was kind of a trick question. I know I like to trick people, but the thing is, there's not just one single formula. We all have different genetic makeups. We've been raised differently so that eating a certain way makes us feel better, perhaps. But there are guidelines, okay? So first of all, a vegetarian approach is certainly a healthy approach, and you can have great energy on a vegetarian diet. But unfortunately, there are some people who go veg and then they just avoid anything that's meat. You know what I mean? They're having French fries and cookies and sodas. Well, it doesn't have any animal products. That's not really the approach to go. I'm not a big fan of intermittent fasting. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. A lot of it is because, well, when you have to go to the bathroom, do you go? My guess is you do, right? Because it's a natural body function when you're, when you have to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom, right? But intermittent fasting says don't pay attention to when you're hungry, just eat during these times of the day. And that really is not a good approach. So I'm not saying it couldn't work, but for many people, in fact, I know somebody who was telling me they were on intermittent fasting, and I said, well, how's it going? They said, well, I've lost 5 pounds. My wife's about to divorce me. You know, what they're saying is it changes their mood entirely, you know, for those few hours until they're about to eat. And by the way, for those of you who don't know about intermittent fasting, it is not necessarily a new approach, but it's when somebody only eats within an 8-hour period. Oftentimes it's 10 o'clock in the morning until whatever. What would that be? 6 o'clock at night, or maybe noon until 8 p.m. You know, but it's a set number of hours. And you know what? Frankly, I don't eat that way, but I'm pretty certain if I did, I would gain weight. And maybe some of you can relate to this. I mean, if I go too long without eating, at the next meal I'm going, you know, are any of you like that? I mean, put it in the chat box if it's like that. So that's not going to work for me. Now, I'm not advocating a high or a low carbohydrate diet. In fact, we're going to be talking about that later on. I just want you to realize that your body is like a car. So when the car is going uphill, it's exerting more energy, it needs more fuel. And you know, it's no different from us. When we're more active, we need more fuel. So we have to think about that. I mean, so many of us, we do our morning workout, don't eat much breakfast, don't eat much lunch, eat all the calories in the evening, and then we're wondering why it really isn't helping us. Maybe not in terms of our weight, our body composition, and how we feel. And it's because you need to give the body the fuel when it needs it. And some of you are saying, well, yeah, but I'm not hungry after I exercise. I get that. I know. I feel the same way. And you might want to try just drinking your calories, because I guess as you're thirsty. And so you could probably drink a smoothie with a little protein powder or whatever, you know, so that you're getting the fuel that you need. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit too, in some greater detail. But I want you to realize you need to have the fuel when your body needs it, because that's how we work best. Now, a lot of times people say, well, why do I even need to eat breakfast? Because all I'm doing is sleeping. And why do I need to eat during the day? Because all I'm doing is sitting. Well, here's another question for you, because people don't understand like how the body uses fuel. And keep in mind, when we're talking about calories, I'm talking about it as a measurement of energy. So don't get hung up on the calories. But you know, when we're sleeping, we obviously burn fewer calories than sitting. I mean, that makes sense. But you know, what percentage? Is it 20% of what we do if we're sitting? So if we sleep for 8 hours, are we burning 20% of what we'd be burning if we were sitting? Or is it 40, or is it 60 or 80? Where is it? 20% is what most people answered. And that's what people think. People assume that when they're sleeping, they're not burning that many calories. And that is so wrong. In fact, the majority of the calories that we burn in a given day is not for any kind of activity. It's to keep us alive. You know, for our heart to beat, for our lungs to breathe, for our brain to process it all. In fact, if you look at the total picture of the day, not the question that I just asked, but the total picture, about 2/3 of all the calories we need in a day is just to keep us alive. So we're not like our computer. You know, we turn off our computer unless it's plugged in. It's not using any fuel. In the human body, we're never really on idle. Or I should say, we're never really off. We're always idling. We're idling at a pretty high speed. So what about breakfast? Is that important for energy? Tell me what you think. Most people are saying yes, and it's probably because I led you down that path. But it is true. We need to eat breakfast. Now, keep in mind that breakfast just means break the fast. So even if you ate at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I mean, really, you're breaking the fast, right? But I do want you to eat it probably in the morning hours. But of course, it depends on what time you're getting up. We're all working different kind of shifts. But the key is you want to eat shortly after you get up. Well, whether that's right away or an hour or 2 or 3, it does matter, but you know, whatever works best for you. I mean, let's face it, some of us get a little nauseated first thing in the morning. I hear that all the time. You know, nauseousness is oftentimes related to not having enough fuel. So sometimes when you're, you know, not getting enough fuel, like that could lead to dehydration. So, excuse me, could lead to feeling nauseous. So I want you to eat probably with an hour or two of getting up. And we'll talk about kind of what that is. But let me ask the next question that's tied into it, and then I need to explain a few things. Will I burn more fat, though, if I skip breakfast? Will I burn more fat if I work out first thing in the morning without eating breakfast? Most of you said, no, you're not going to burn more fat. Tricked you again, because actually you do burn more fat, but there's a caveat to that. And that's what we're going to be talking about here. You burn more fat, so just hold that thought here, and let me ask the next question. See, because we don't just burn fat as a fuel. It's important to understand this. We actually burn two fuels. And yeah, I know we don't think about that in terms of like, I'm not talking about like what our stomach eats. I'm saying every cell in the human body, the brain, the heart, the liver, the bones, those are live cells. They need calories, fuel to stay alive. And they use glucose and or fat to burn it. And in total, like the human body, what percent is glucose? What percent is fat on the average? Because it's going to be different for different people. Most people said 25% fat, 75% glucose. And you probably could get there on a very, 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 very high carbohydrate diet. Most of us are not consuming that. For most of it, it's 50-50. And this is where it really gets kind of fascinating. So kind of, turn on your brain here. Hopefully you had 50 milligrams of caffeine so you can, think about this. I want you to think about the fuel that you eat in terms of a 50-50 mix. So we're burning fat and we're burning glucose, right? 50-50. But here's the thing. Anybody have any idea how much fat stores we've got? Don't worry, I'll tell you. Even if you're lean, I mean lean, you've probably got over 100,000 calories worth of stored fat in you. And that's because it's not just around your middle. I mean, fat is around every organ and part of every cell. We have a lot of fat in the body. So you have a lot of fat stores to dig into if you don't eat, even if you skip breakfast. But the thing is, does anybody have any idea how much, glucose stores we got? It's in the form of glycogen. Anybody want to guess how many calories worth? Go ahead and put in the chat box. How many calories we have of stored glucose? It's in the form of glycogen. So whichever way you want to think about it. Go ahead. Anybody in the chat box? 2,000? 50,000? 5,000? No. 0, says Melinda. Yeah, actually, do you know it's only like 300 or 400 calories? Now, for those of you who don't know anything about calories, it's pretty much what you find in a very low calorie meal. It's not very much. In other words, when you go to bed, the body starts burning, well, not just when you go to bed, but shortly after you finish eating, you start burning your stored, I wrote glucose, but it's really in the form of glycogen. It starts burning that as a fuel, but the problem with that is, even though you may have heard, oh, we've got 24 hours worth of stores, kind of true, because what happens is we start off fully with our glycogen stores and it immediately goes down. The body tries to, use less and less and less so we have longer stores of this glucose. Anybody want to guess what we burn instead when our glycogen stores start running down? Go ahead and put it in the chat box. No, that's the problem. It's not fat. Isn't that incredible? Yeah, we'd like to say that. Ryan, you get your 2 bonus points because, yeah, we burn protein. Protein. That means you worked out really hard at the gym. And it doesn't matter if you go too long without eating, it depends. Like when you wake up in the morning, they say it's about 25% of your glycogen stores are remaining. Most of it's coming from protein. Now, keep in mind that this process happens all throughout the day. So to burn a little protein is not a big deal. It's just that the longer you go, the more protein that you're losing. And let me share with you a story of a client that I saw. She came to me because she was extremely fatigued. The doctor had done a run-up, with all the labs and everything, couldn't find anything wrong with her. And she said, he told me to come see you. And, but, I just don't know what's going on. And so we just started talking about, what do you do? And she was saying that she exercises every day and she feels pretty good in the evening by the time she exercises. It's just like all throughout the day. And you know what she's doing, kind of like what many of us do, eating very little during the day, eating most in the evening. She's working out in the evening as well. But what I thought was even more incredible was she shared with me, she had some stretch, workout pants on. And she said, could this have anything to do with this? And she pulled down her pants in the back showing cellulite. And you ladies know about cellulite, that little cottage cheese kind of stuff. And let's face it, we all have a little bit of it. None of us look as perfect as in the magazine because, well, they've been airbrushed. But she had like going all the way down to her knees. And I'm thinking, wow, she's like 21 years old. That's kind of odd. And then we started talking about how she exercised, and it made perfect sense. So she's not eating anything during the day. She works out in the evening. She thinks she's building muscle, but then she's chiseling it all day long. And she's been doing this for so long, so the body really isn't adjusting. So a couple of you said, well, isn't she going to be burning more fat? And yeah, I did say if we skip breakfast, you go too long, you're going to burn more fat. But the thing is, you're not burning 100% fat. Now, the more fat you burn does change over time. So here's my next question. How long do we need to fast? I'm talking not eat anything, which most of us are not doing. How long do we need to fast before the body turns to burning 100% fat as fuel? Yeah, most of you are correct in looking at the larger numbers, but you know what? Your body will never, ever, ever, ever burn 100% fat. And let me tell you why. Because the brain of ours is programmed to burn glucose. So it's what we call a non-flex organ, like non-flex fuel. It needs glucose. Our heart likes fat. Working out muscles, they want more glucose, although they'll run on some fat as well. A lot of them are flex, but when it comes to the brain, glucose only. Red blood cells, glucose only. Bone marrow, glucose only. Nervous system, glucose only. So we have these organs that are non-flex fuel. In other words, they have to have glucose. So if you're not eating anything, or if you're not eating enough carbs, because that's happened to some people, they're going to burn either the protein in the food, if you're eating low carb, or they're going to burn your lean muscle mass. It has no choice. In fact, you could fast for 3 days and your body does start turning some of our fat into what's called ketone bodies, but it's about 17% of all the fuel in the brain. That's it, is ketone bodies. Again, it's still burning glucose. After 40 days, still, even after 40 days of complete fasting, 1/3 of all the fuel is coming from glycogen, either from the carbohydrate stores or coming from the glucose that's coming from the breakdown of protein. So in other words, I want you to realize that going too long without eating is really not a good thing. Now I realize, and some people are doing it for a religious purpose, and it does help them in a psychological way, and it doesn't hurt to necessarily fast in a lot of religions, whether you're talking about fasting during Ramadan or you're fasting like on a Sunday in the Mormon faith. I'm not saying the body is used to this, burning up a little bit of protein and then replacing it. It's just that when people do it all the time, like they're doing the intermittent fasting, people say, oh, they lose weight. Well, of course, because they're eating fewer calories, but not because they're intermittently fasting. Does the blood values improve? Yeah, a lot of times it does. But again, not because they're eating on an intermittent diet way, intermittent fasting way, but because they're probably eating few calories. Now that's assuming that squishing your eating within an 8-hour period makes you eat less. I guarantee for some people, and I'm one of those, I'd be like, oh, I gotta eat because I'm not gonna be able to eat for another, 16 hours. So, a lot of that's individual. So how often should we eat? 2 meals a day, minimum of 3 meals a day? Should we have some, snacks? So we're eating every 3 waking hours. So people say it's different for different people, and you're kind of thinking along the line of where I was talking about. It is different for different people. But I would say generally, when you look at the research and consider everything about performance, health, everything, people who eat 1 or 2 times a day tend to have poorer performance. They tend to have more mood changes throughout the day. But in addition, they get that sluggish, sleepy feeling after they eat that big meal, which I know some of you have experienced. And so it doesn't help you to eat 1 or 2 meals a day. So I think the optimal is really a minimum of 3. Now, some people assume that snacking is good, and frankly, I snack. I love to snack. It does help a lot of people feel more energized. I like to have a small bit, because if I eat bigger meals, I feel sluggish, but if I eat a small amount 6 times a day, I'm good. But snacks are really, really important for kids, by the way. Babies, they basically have a smaller liver, so they can store less glycogen, so they really need to eat on a regular basis. Older individuals can't eat very much at one time, so it's a good idea to eat smaller meals more frequently. Athletes definitely need to eat, whether it's 6 times a day or 8 times a day, but that's where it differs. And so a minimum of 3 is really the correct answer. When should you shut off eating? I'll tell you, you should shut it off as early as possible is all I can say. But if you can't really eat until 8 o'clock, I don't want you to start feeling guilty about that. But ask yourself, is there a way for you to eat earlier? And the reason is this. We have a circadian rhythm. People assume that we get up when the sun comes up and we go to sleep after it goes down. And that's just what we prefer, when in fact the body is programmed to do these kind of things. And our enzymes and hormones are also programmed. So in other words, insulin works very well during the day, and it doesn't work well at night, because we're not supposed to be eating at night. We're supposed to be sleeping. So people who work shift work tend to have more problems with diabetes, with cancer, with weight, because the body cannot metabolize foods in the same way. So all I can say is as early as possible. But like I said, I realize we all have to kind of adjust it to our own schedule. So here's another question. What's the role of protein? And then we talk a little bit about protein and how much to eat and so forth. Isn't that interesting? Most of you said building muscles. And I'd like to talk about my freckles. See, I'm covered with freckles. People think I'm tan, but it's really just a billion freckles. And you know what? Out of all these freckles here, none of them were here last month. None of them. Odd, isn't it? Now, granted, there were some freckles there, but they weren't these freckles, because 1% of the body's proteins break down on a daily basis, and they have to be replaced. The protein is important for building muscles, yes, but also for building bones and freckles, for keeping us full. Protein meals, and so some of you ask for breakfast, you just want to make sure you have some protein at every single meal. We'll talk about how much that is. It does help us with alertness, because too many carbs can affect our blood sugars in a funky way. And I really think the Canadian Food Guide really does a good job of illustrating this. And it's really quite simple. Filling up half your plate with fruits and vegetables, because they have the vitamins and minerals that you just can't find anyplace else. The vitamins and minerals that keep us healthy. And then, but also, a quarter of the plate or so protein, and then your grains, which are higher in carbohydrates. And the research shows, and I've got a sponge here, you know how like a sponge can absorb only so much water and then no more? I want you to think about protein in your body kind of the same way. At any one time, if you eat like this huge steak or put 3 scoops of protein powder in your fruit smoothie, people think, oh, I'm going to bulk up. You know what? The body maxes out. It cannot metabolize more than, 35 grams of protein at one time. Now, we always tell people, somewhere around 20 grams, about, if you're eating animal protein, by the way, we'll talk about it otherwise, but, 20 grams of protein for if it's, let me stop sharing that, So 20 grams of protein, like the size of a deck of cards, 35 might be like the size of a kitchen sponge. The thing is, if you eat 100 grams of protein, which you don't even have to know what that is, but I mean more than your body needs, it doesn't matter. The body is not going to utilize any more than 35. So it's important to eat some protein, but not all at the same time. Too many people, they tend to eat huge amounts in the evening and say, I'm done, I've met my RDA, when in fact, the body can only use so much. You really need to eat it throughout the day. So think about it every single meal to have 20 to 35. So what that means is if you're eating eggs, well, 3 eggs will do it, or 2 eggs and an ounce of cheese. If you're doing, a vegetarian approach, a cup of quinoa gives you about 10 grams. You can get another cup of beans and you're at, 10 or 15 grams. I mean, you can easily do it. Yogurt has about as much as milk, which is about 8 grams per cup. But if it's Greek yogurt, it's more concentrated, it might be twice as much. So, check out some of the labels that you've got. It's very easy to do it in a vegetarian approach, so I don't want you to think that you can't. But those grains are also important because it is what? Here's your next question. Carbohydrates, is it needed for brain food, fuel for the active muscles, as a source of fiber, vitamins, minerals? Or all of the above? Yeah. Okay, you're already there, I can tell. Yes, it does fuel the brain. It is fuel for the active muscles. It's a very important tool. People that eat a low carb diet, they're oftentimes not getting adequate amount of fiber. They're not getting the same vitamins and minerals because there are vitamins and minerals found in carbs that you can't find in protein. So, and we think about total health, not just macros. A lot of people are really into these macros. So I want you to realize it really is about this balance in terms of getting a small amount of protein at every meal, even breakfast and lunch. And so some of you might have to be creative. I like peanut butter on toast, but when you look it up, there's not enough. So I have it with a glass of soy milk. And so I'm able to get it up to 20 that way. Now, just in summary, let me just say that I mentioned that sleep can affect our energy, movement, the whole psychology piece. We're not talking about that here, but I also want to mention that there are some other things that can cause fatigue. And some of you mentioned that in your questions. For example, diabetes. Did you know that 9% of all adults, and this is not just US, I mean, this is a worldwide statistic, about 9% have diabetes, which means that the glucose isn't being utilized by the cells. So of course you're low energy. And then we got another 35% that have pre-diabetes. They're on the path. So that could cause fatigue. If you feel like you have obstructive sleep apnea because your spouse or partner keeps on saying you're snoring or you're stopping breathing and then taking a breath, you may not remember it in the morning. But if they say it, get it checked out because there are so many people that have problems with that. And if you're more overweight, but I think it's like 25% of all adults are having problems with that. Anemia can cause problems, even vitamin B12 deficiencies, which is a type of anemia. It turns out when I was 50, I got diagnosed with low vitamin B12. I eat meat, so that wasn't it, because you probably know if you're vegetarian, you need to take supplements of B12. But that wasn't my case. Mine was just genetic. And sure enough, my grandfather had it, and I didn't realize that. So maybe you need to take supplements. Low thyroid, that could contribute to it. And I'll tell you, during this time of the year, we need to talk about vitamin D because 1/3 of adults are deficient in vitamin D, partly because we don't get outside and get enough sunlight, or when we're outside, we're using sunblock, or maybe we're thinking we're sitting next to the big picture window. Well, those rays don't make it past the glass, so they're not going to come into our skin. Dark-skinned individuals have a really difficult time developing vitamin D through their skin. And I tell you, there's so few foods that contain vitamin D. It's the fatty fish, salmon, herring, sardines. It's really hard to get enough vitamin D. So you might want to get checked because very low levels of vitamin D can also make you feel very fatigued. And then there's seasonal affective disorder. We know depression can make us feel low energy, But during this time of the year, the coldest months of the year, when you're far away from the equation, it could be 10 or 15% are having issues with that. So there is my website, by the way, is drjoe.com, and you can get on my blog, and I do have an article that I just wrote about vitamin D, an article that I just did about seasonal affective disorder, one that I just did about bright light therapy, which I do as well, using a bright light lamp. They're very small, they're very bright. I don't have it plugged in, so I can't show you. But solutions for some of these are very small. And whenever I work with clients and they find out that these are the problems, they're like, oh my gosh, I've been dealing with this for years. I thought it was just me. A lot of these are really quick fixes. So make sure you take a look at it. So, in summary, I just want you to know food is fuel. Eating a balanced diet is really what you need throughout the day, not just in the evening. Remember that caffeine is a good stimulant drug, but that's what it is. It's not real energy. Make sure you have a small amount of protein in every meal. Get that balance. And we didn't have time to talk about all that, but I did want to let you know that if you're interested, because remember I said there's prizes for everyone, go to my website /prize. So it's a singular, Prize, prize, and you can sign up. I've got an email sequence that's starting on Monday that is full of videos and blogs that dive a little bit deeper into all the topics that we've talked about. So it's kind of like a mini course in itself. So I'll send that out to everybody who signs up for that list. And also, I'm giving away 25 copies of Reboot as well. They'll be randomly drawn. So points really don't matter in that way. I asked you to keep track of the points so they're fun, but it doesn't matter in terms of who wins the books. That's going to be a random drawing. And by the way, somebody asked about the bright light lamp. Beth, it sounds like you've used that. If you go to my website under books, it actually has a lot of products, and you'll see the one that I use that's listed there. And also the URL for the prize is just drjoe.com/prize. So there's no tab on the website. I don't want people to get into it and get into prizes. So /prize. So, and do I have to, I don't mind staying on if people have got some questions.
I'll give you a couple questions, and certainly we can send out a link to your website. So absolutely. And any other questions, the team can continue to bring in. I'm sure there's a lot of great information. So
yeah, and just reach out to me. I'm easy to reach.
Yeah, the one question, I'll just start to read a couple. One question was what's an optimal time to work out? And should you eat before working out? What should you eat? Protein before?
Okay,
after?
good question. What's the best time to work out?
Yeah.
The time that works best for you is really the correct answer, okay? It really is. Some people, they're morning people, some people late people. We used to think that working out late was bad for sleep, and the research has not shown that. Of course, if it stimulates you. For example, when I exercise, it doesn't prevent me from getting good night's sleep, and I'm a tap dancer. And I'm not going on Monday nights now with COVID. But when I did, I found myself I'd get back at like 10 o'clock, and I was just overly stimulated. But in general, getting a workout would not prevent you from getting good night's sleep, according to the research. What do you eat? If you're exercising first thing in the morning, I really highly recommend somewhere around 15 grams of carbohydrate to stop that protein loss. In other words, it's just 15 grams of carbs. For example, that's the equivalent of, it doesn't have to be a slice of bread, but a slice of bread. You could find that probably in some kind of quick granola bar. A banana would do it. So it doesn't have to be any special kinds of food. Some people, half of a small bagel. Most people say they can't put too much on their stomach. I know a guy who works out after a big bowl of oatmeal. I couldn't do that. It has to be kind of small. And then afterwards, here's what you have to realize is if you've used up not only the glycogen in your liver while you're working out, and I'm talking about not a walk, but a workout, right? You burn that glycogen in your liver. You've also burned the glycogen in the muscles that you've used. And so right after you exercise, you want to eat a lot of carbs, probably 50 or 60 grams, which could be several portions of carbs, because those will go right back into the muscles, not go into fat. It won't make you sluggish and sleep because most of the time it goes back into the muscles that just utilize that. Research shows that if you eat those carbs within 30 minutes of working out, they'll go and double the source of glycogen. That's why trained athletes can go longer than, think about the marathon. They can, a trained athlete can go longer without crashing than somebody who hasn't trained properly. And then the protein is real important, because realize that when you work out, people always think, I'm going to exercise to build muscle. But if you don't give the body the protein, which is the building blocks of that muscle, you've just spent time at the gym. You've just broken down those muscles, because it's a two-step process. First, you break the muscles down. That's what exercise is. And then you build it up stronger. So you got to make sure you have the protein there. And again, it could be just, that 20 to 35 grams of protein. It could be, 1 scoop of protein powder. In most cases, that's it. Or, my peanut butter on an English muffin with a large glass of milk, that could do it. It could be beans and rice. It could be leftover pizza, and then, pile on the cheese and the pepperoni. Obviously, that's not the best choice for health-wise, but I'm just saying, there's so many different ways that we can get that protein, and you want to eat within 30 minutes. And I'll tell you, for many people, because they don't feel like eating, I know that's true for me, they might want to put it in their beverage because they do feel like drinking or dehydrated.
Yeah. We had another question about caffeine, to understand, why does caffeine affect people differently? And in the Q&A, they're wondering why they can drink caffeine all day and sleep fine, but their wife cannot. If they drink too close to bedtime, can't sleep.
Okay, first of all, let me share with you. Have you ever watched? I have 7 grandbabies, really young grandbabies, and sometimes they don't get enough sleep, and you're feeding them, and they're going like this, right? They fall asleep. Okay. Hold that thought in mind. See, because when people say, I drink caffeine all day and it doesn't affect my sleep, my guess is if you're overly exhausted, nothing is going to keep you awake, because the human body will sleep regardless. Okay. So most of the time when I have people say it doesn't affect my sleep, my guess is you could have a fast metabolism, and that does happen. But in most cases, my guess is people are sleep deprived. And that's why they're drinking caffeine all day, because they're sleep deprived, right? And so nothing is going to keep them up. What the research shows, though, is it does disrupt the sleep cycle during the night, so it's not as refreshing. So the next morning you wake up, guess what? You're sleepy, you drink caffeine, and you continue to drink it because you can't get your alertness up. So I'm just saying what the research supports. It may not be quite the same story that you think it is. And yes, there are different tolerances as well, but not great.
Yeah, awesome. And during the caffeine discussion, there was a question in the chat about a melatonin restrictor ? And I don't know if that's related to caffeine or what that means.
I think what they're talking about is that when you have caffeine, it prevents your body from producing melatonin in the evening. Bright lights has a much bigger factor in that. In other words, and I talk about this when I talk about sleep, which is not the topic here, but the bright lights that we experience in the evening, whether it's our home lights, our screen, or our phones, it doesn't matter. Those blue lights affect the brain from producing melatonin. Light goes down the optic nerve into our brain, and it shuts off melatonin production. So that's going to be a great bigger factor in keeping us awake, because we need that melatonin production to make us sleepy at night. And by the way, for those of you who are thinking, well, I'll cheat and I'll just take a melatonin supplement, they found out that even 5 milligrams of melatonin cancel out those bright lights. So you've just wasted your money.
Got it. So that's what we had from the chat. I think we've covered all that, but I'm sure if there's any other questions, folks, feel free to reach out to me and I'll get them to Dr. Joe.
That's fabulous.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. We've got lots of thank yous in the chat. So I appreciate everybody's time, really, very much.
All right. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.